Okay, we're getting the stream going. Um, Good morning, everybody. Welcome to class. Today, I'm gonna be doing the Presocratics. Let me think. It's 5 philosophers. Hopefully not 5 hours. I think it will be maybe shorter than last week. Just because there's not going to be an hour of reading. The pre-Socratics are just fragments we have left over. Um, so it's not a whole long ancient poem to read through like last week. But I got a lot of notes. I got some pictures this time. People wanted pictures, so I got some pictures for you guys. Probably could have done some more, but I spent 6 hours doing this yesterday, so I kind of procrastinated. Need to reschedule, reorder how I do prepare for this stream, and I'm gonna reschedule some things this week. Change the day off I have to Thursday probably. This is still gonna be on Sundays. But yeah, I'm excited. I think it's gonna be cool. I didn't get as many questions as I wanted to get, but I do have to slow down some more and wait for the latency to answer questions or for people to ask questions, because I also got that criticism that I should wait for the lag or latency to kick through for people to ask questions. I mean, I already gotta wait like 20 minutes for people to show up. But yeah, this should be good. I got my chat on my phone today because it doesn't fit on my laptop screen. I was gonna get a new monitor like yesterday. I wanted to, but just too damn busy. Maybe after this today. I don't know. It depends on things, but yeah. I'm gonna wait till I see some more people in the chat. Yeah. What to fill up the time with. So I didn't do the Pythagoreans because I ran out of time and I already have a lot to talk about. Talking about 5 pre-Socratics in one sitting is like nuts. It's just like I got like 9 topics and a lot of things to cover. I don't know. I don't want to rush through this, but I want to do it in like sections. So getting like almost all the pre-Socratics done in one stream is pretty good. The Pythagoreans, they can wait. They're kind of different, kind of the same. They got a lot of weird stuff about them. So I'm gonna do them next week with the sophists, and then choose some Plato to do after that, and then after that do some Tao Te Ching, and probably some comparison with Plato on that. Yeah, it's been 4.5 minutes. Okay, this is good. This is great. Sunset's in the chat. I could see that. She's the only one so far. I'm gonna wait a minute just to see more people will show up before I start. Last time I waited 20 minutes. I don't want to wait that long again. Um, yeah. Um, Maybe I could talk a little bit about how I should re plan how I do this because doing it like all the day before pretty much is not great. I don't know. I think it's obvious that I should just do a little bit every day, like after dinner, but I don't know. It's not working out that way. It's hard to make myself work on that schedule for some reason. I just end up like getting so busy, and then I do my whole. I only have one day off a week for myself, and then I just end up spending the whole day off doing this, like interpreting, taking notes, making a script, um, reorganizing my presentation until it's right, and memorizing shit. So I don't know. Clearly, I need a better way to do it. Um, yeah, I'll figure it out one of these days. Um, Still just sunset. Paul should be here. Brady will probably be here unless he forgets. Maybe Eric. I know that Kara was interested in this stuff. She came in kind of late last time, so who knows? I got the schedule up, so people are supposed to know when to come, and not make me sit here and wait for them. Yeah, but I don't know. I really like philosophy. I like doing this stuff. In some ways, I like doing it better than in the classroom because this is just so much more chill. I mean, I still feel some pressure to do it and maybe a little anxiety to present it, but there's, I don't know, I can write whatever I want pretty much, and it's more like my own thing, and I feel like it's different to not have someone else expect you to do it and have to do it yourself, to try and push yourself to do it, and like keep your brain working and interested in these types of different thinking patterns. I think it's good for me, and maybe if I ever go back to school, this would definitely be helpful for me, like as review, staying on my toes, not forgetting everything that I learned. I mean, clearly I didn't forget everything because I can just put a whole 5-page single space script with notes together in one day, with like very little research. Not to toot my own horn, but I think I remember a lot of the stuff, which is kind of surprising. I mean, I did do it for years and years, every day, hours and hours. I don't even know how many hours I spent doing philosophy, reading about it, thinking about it, writing about it. It's kind of nuts, to like take a year and a half off from it and still be able to do these presentations. I find that, I don't know, like crazy. Like our memories are crazy, for some things with certain amounts of exposure. In certain ways we can remember like so much shit. Yeah, that's my spiel. I don't know what else I have to say. 10 minutes left. I don't know if I wait 20 minutes again. I don't know. The whole thing has like an order and an organization. I don't want to get people who are going to stay the whole time. I don't want them to, excuse me, to miss out. apparently this is something else I should think out. I need to plan something to. Oh, yeah. I don't want to seem desperate, but just a reminder. Would be good. Yeah. That's a good idea. I could plan something in case this keeps happening. I could plan some like announcements. I mean, I just did some reflections, or something else to fill the time. Um, Let me see. Paul's busy today. He can only stop by for a couple minutes. That kind of sucks, but that's okay. Maybe I'll tell Jake. He's probably not up to anything. Can I get class credit for this? Sure. Extra credit. And I'll tell Eric. There's so much to do all the time. I could tell Herschel. He usually likes to goof around, though. Do you not check chat? I just read your chat, bro. And Eric, the last person. My chat is on my phone today because the PowerPoint takes up so much space. What are you so busy today with, Paul? You procrastinated your homework when you were drinking and playing Pokemon last night? Philosophy stream. Okay. Shit. Texts are out. I'm gonna start in a bit, because it's been 14 minutes. Yeah, we'll see what happens today. I don't know if it'll be as populated as last time, but yeah. 20 seconds till 15 minutes. How's that? I'll start at 15 minutes. 20 minutes is too long. Come on. Okay. Okay, so the Presocratics. The Presocratics are they kind of have their own discourse, but also they have some differences between each other. Different schools, different places. Yeah, the first three of them. I mean, they just group them together because they just have fragments left of them, and so they all existed around the same time ish. Some of them were contemporaries with each other, friends, enemies, and yeah. So since it's Socrates and Plato were so important, they just lump them as the Presocratics. And since there's such little left, it's kind of just like a overarching term that doesn't really describe them well, but it is what it is. The first three pre-Socratic philosophers are from Miletus. They're interested in astronomy, geometry, and philosophy concerning the cosmogony of the universe. So, for the beginning of philosophy, most of the few hundred years of the beginning of philosophy, especially the pre-Socratic, science and philosophy were like deeply connected. So the first three are from Miletus, which is in modern day Turkey. It's an ancient ruin now. Their names are Thales, Anaximenes, and Anaximander. I know when I first heard the names, I was like, what the fuck? And then also, why are Anaximenes and Anaximander so close? It just takes a while for you to like try and discern between them. I hope it doesn't get too confusing for you guys. So Thales, Anaximenes, and Anaximander based their thinking off the physical observation which they made around them. So a lot of empirical observations to try and like think about what's like the basic building blocks of the universe. And so yeah, they have this idiom that they work in that is like scientific. They love staring at the stars, doing astronomy, and some of them do geometry and invent stuff. So yeah, they really try and connect the outer experiences they have with the inner life of the mind. Then after them, this is just a preface, just so you know what we're getting into. After them is Heraclitus of Ephesus. He was much more political and abstract and has a different tone and character. And he begins this like sort of politically charged philosophy in some ways, and also like lots of paradoxes and cryptic riddles that he liked to throw at people. And he was this like had this whole persona of like being a cranky old cynic, and very interesting. The most interesting of the pre-Socratics, definitely, in my opinion. He begins that sort of discourse in that idiom, and Parmenides comes after him and continues to challenge Heraclitus and the people before him from Miletus. Paul's doing chores today, plus he's in fantasy football leagues, plus homework. Okay, that's fine. Enjoy your chores and fantasy football and homework. Will you try history as well, or just philosophy? Do you mean am I going to do history streams? Like history of philosophy, or other type of history? I'm not sure exactly what you mean, Herschel. Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a week or something. No, you were here on like Tuesday, just lurking. History in general, myths too. Well, I did do stuff about myths last Sunday with Hesiod's Theogony. I know that you know or have heard about that because of the professor we both had. I mean, I do dabble and do the philosophers in historical order at the moment. And I don't really do like historical dates or like talk about like historical differences. Like this person thinks this happened, but this author thinks like has another theory about the real history. Like I don't really do that type thing. Um, uh, Sometimes I'm in the zone, other times I'm distracted. Yeah, that's okay. That happens. What I do is give an overview of like the important points in the um, philosopher's work, whichever philosopher I'm doing, or whichever piece of work I decide to do for the week. And so, uh, narratives are more interesting than dates. Yeah, history has many interesting stories to share. I'm just not. I just didn't really study history. I mean, I know some interesting history according to that's related to philosophers and philosophy, but not like. I mean, I didn't take a history class. I mean, I guess I'm interested in history, like, but I just feel like this is more my main thing. It's more. I mean, what I'm doing in history classes weren't great. I mean, what I'm doing is a history of philosophy, essentially, showing you how they're in discussion with each other, um, and how their ideas formed and evolved based on who came before them and who came after. I'm not doing analytical. I'm not doing an argument thing here. I'm doing interpretation based on how I learned it in presentation of, yeah, I guess some of the history. I probably should start though. Okay, so I did the preface. A lot of topics to go through, so let's get going. The Presocratics An Overview. So the first one I already mentioned was Thales of Miletus. So there's not a lot on Thales. He's known as the first philosopher in Western thought. There's even less that I could find online that I could quote for free. And yeah, so I have just this slide for Thales. So essentially, since the Theogony came out, um, are you hoping to get modern philosophers like Anscombe? Anscombe? I have no idea who that is. I'm gonna do modern at some point. Yeah. When I get to that in the historical arc of what I've been doing. Uh, Mostly I'm gonna do ones I'm familiar with. If it's like something I could handle in a week and somebody new, I would probably look into it. But anyways, Thales and his like contemporaries are really interested in Hesiod's Theogony because of the astronomy associated with it and the beginnings of the universe and like what is the most universal substance. So they all try and like hash out their own cosmologies. Thales thinks it's water. He thinks that like the most universal material and basic material in the universe is water. And the earth floats on the water. Water is the cause of everything. This last thing, all things are full of gods. The magnet is alive, for it has the power of moving iron. I don't know as much about that. I haven't read that much about that. It was just in the thing I copied and grabbed to pull over here. What's more important is that they were making scientific observations to try and explain the world around them, and doing it in this kind of thoughtful way. Anscombe is a philosopher when talking about intentions and actions. Idiot. Water exists naturally as solid, liquid, and gas. Yeah, that's a good point. It has I mean, water is really important to life. It seems to be in our bodies, in animals' bodies, in plants. It grows the plants. I mean, most of the world is covered in water. So I think that there's something to it. It's not really about him. I mean, he might be just be joking, Paul, but they were just trying to figure things out. It wasn't really about like I don't know. They're just like testing stuff. Maybe it's water, and water is really important. So why not? So his critics realized that like water as the origin doesn't really make that much sense because all the other elements wouldn't really exist. Like, how do you get fire out of water? And if water is wet all the time, where does the dry earth come from? And air doesn't seem that connected with water. Um, yeah, his like cosmology kind of falls apart. Um, Calling Thales an idiot, not you. Yeah, that's what I thought. I still don't think Thales is an idiot. I think he's just trying his best. He doesn't really know what's going on. He's the first philosopher, but yeah. So something that I couldn't find that I included here is, I mean, that's basically Thales. There's not that much about him. They're trying to have an answer to the theogony, like analyze it, like, oh, there's this beginning of the universe, like what was something around us that is like super important that could be like connected to that. And so yeah, that's what Thales and the other philosophers of the Milesian school, which Milesian is somebody from Miletus, do. They're really interested in that. So other things that I included that I don't have quotes for because I couldn't find them for free, copyright, but I have in a book, is the first myth about the first philosopher, and it's like this: Thales was thinking about philosophy so much as he looked up at the starry sky and was doing astronomy at the same time that he just walked and fell down a well, and some little girl like made fun of him. And that's like the first myth about the first philosopher. um yeah, so um that's pretty funny. I always liked that. Well, isn't water wet though? Yeah, it sure is wet. Yeah, that was part of the problem. Another fragment that I couldn't find is that philosophy is not to be used for money. It's something about the philosopher could very easily use his like skills of logic and analysis to like predict markets or like crop shares or something and like make money off of it, but that's not the purpose of philosophy or the philosopher. And so this like early sentiment is still pretty popular in a lot of discourse today, even as like philosophy's become this profession that's caught up in universities and college and like producing books to make you money. It's still something that's really like core and important to philosophy, as like um, this pursuit of wisdom and love of like discussion and knowledge instead of something that you like, I'm going to be rich, so I'm going to be a philosopher. Like nobody ever said that. And um uh what a nerd. Isn't Oh, water isn't wet though. Oh, I'm confused. Okay. So I agree with like the sentiment, and I like it that like philosophy isn't used for money. But it's also from a historical lens, it is like kind of shaky because most of the history of Western philosophy is super, not super wealthy, but like comfortably upper class wealthy dudes, who don't have any problem, and so they can just do philosophy all day long because they don't have to worry about their needs. They have like servants to take care of them, and um so it's not without its like elitist flair and problems to say like oh, you don't need money. You don't want to make money when you do philosophy. But most of the people who have been saying that for the past 1,000 years have been really well off and had never had a problem in their life concerning financial responsibilities or difficulties. So it does have a sort of, not even sort of, it has a hypocritical uh, tone to go with the history of like philosophy isn't about money, but also everybody who ever did philosophy was really rich. So that's my spiel on that. We're gonna move on from Thales. I know that it's sounds really short, but that's really the first philosopher in a nutshell. Um, so people don't think it's water. Next one is Anaximenes. He believes that the arche and universal material of the universe is air. So Anaximenes is actually the third pre-Socratic historically, but since his theories are more of a commentary on Thales' work than Anaximander, who is second, I put Anaximenes second instead of Anaximander, um, even though it's not historically in order. So he oh, I have to read the quotes. Anaximenes of Miletus, son of Eurystratos, who had been an associate of Anaximander, said, like him, that the underlying substance was one and infinite. He did not, however, say it was indeterminate like Anaximander, but determinate, for he said it was air. So he has some differences from Thales in that he agrees with Anaximander that there's this infinity to the substance of the universe, but instead of saying it's just infinity, he says it's air. So let me read some more. From it, he said, the things that are and have been and shall be, the gods and things divine took their rise, while other things come from its offspring. Just as, he said, our soul, being air, holds us together, so do breath and air encompass the whole world. When it is dilated so as to be rarer, it becomes fire, while winds, on the other hand, are condensed air. Cloud is formed from air by felting, and this still further condensed becomes water. Water condensed still more turns to earth, and when condensed as much as it can be, to stones. So this is something that he tries to do. He says that it's air, but then he sees the problem with Thales's idea that like water is in conflict with the other elements. So this last one that I read, like he comes up with a scientific explanation-ish thing, like air can become any of the elements. Like when it's hot, when it's like rarefied, it can become like warmer, and you can have warm wind, hot wind. It could turn into fire, and then it turns into clouds. If it becomes so condensed and cold, it can become water, which is true. I mean, kind of true in a certain way. And then somehow, if it's super condensed, it turns to earth and then stones. So yeah, even though it's not all totally correct, you could see that he's trying to like come up with a solution to Thales's argument here. So yeah, that's his ideas. He also chose air in part because of the Pythagoreans, because they believe that the soul was the breath, and so he mentions this in the second thing. No, the third one. Breath and air encompass the whole world, and our breath, our soul holds us together. So this still doesn't explain fire, though. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, I mean, these are the first little dudes. They're little like baby philosophers. You know, they're trying their best to work off of Hesiod's theogony in the world around them. And Hesiod's theogony is like nuts and has all this crazy stuff they're trying to think out, which is kind of impossible with the gods and all that stuff. Yeah, it's fine if it doesn't make sense. Just go with it, you know. It's not. This is supposed to be like the beginnings. So I do find it interesting that like he went with air because it's like the soul of the world. We have our own souls and we're connected in that way, and you could still see like this. I mean, ancient Greek like breath. I can't remember the word for it, but it like the literal translation is soul, I think. And so you could see that it's like still a trope in like films today. Like I was watching one of the Harry Potter movies the other day, and like Sirius's black soul like was coming out of his like mouth, and that's like something when people die, they like breathe and their soul goes away and goes to heaven or whatever. So that's still a thing. I don't. You're doing the Pythagorean theorem, but like we go from these guys to Plato and Aristotle, which is such a huge jump in thinking. Yeah. Um, I mean, you're gonna see Heraclitus is much more different from these people, and so is Parmenides and the sophists as well. So you will see. Just keep watching with bated breath. You will see that philosophy advances throughout this whole presentation. So yeah, um, that's pretty much Anaximenes. Oh, I have another. I have another quote. It was natural for Anaximenes to fix upon air as the primary substance. Oh, this is from the author, not from Anaximenes. For in the system of Anaximander, it occupied an intermediate place between the two fundamental opposites, the ring of flame and the cold, moist mass within it. We know from Plutarch that he fancied air became warmer when rarefied and colder when condensed. On this he satisfied himself by a curious experimental proof. When we breathe with our mouths open, the air is warm. When our lips are closed, it is cold. So, I mean, this is just early thought. Like, don't even be like thinking these guys are dumb, because they have different ways of being, different ways of like mythological thinking. Um, and this is what they had to work with. You know, you stare at the stars with your blank eyeballs. You try and navigate a ship with the stars, and then you're like, wow. When we go like, the air is warmer. When we go, the air is colder. And so, and we're working in this idiom that the two fundamental opposites in the universe were hot and cold, or dry and moist. And so that's where I was gonna bring that up later, but I forgot I have this part. That's where some of this comes from. Like I said, Thales was like, "Oh, everything's water," but then people are like, "Why are dry stuff around?" And then Anaximenes is like, "Well, air is kind of like you can get some moist fog, then you can get some like really dry air off the fire, you know, and air can dry out clothes or dry out wet stuff." So this is something that they were working within this sort of first opposition of physical experiences they're finding in the universe, which is an intelligent way to go about it. Like, it's not really like, I don't think it's, I mean, obviously they're not on the same level as Plato, but at the same time, like, they are working with what they got, you know? And so I'm not trying to argue with you like a lot, Paul, but I don't think it's fair to call them dumb. They are working a certain idiom with certain opposites. They're doing discourse. They're starting philosophy, and yeah, simple, humble beginnings. You know. Let me get a drink. Air is a primary substance. I prefer water. Okay, that's fine. Anyone else prefer anything else as a primary substance? I'm just curious. Um, Air as a medium between hot and cold is a strange idea. Really? I mean, there's hot and cold air. I mean, there's also hot and cold water. It's more. I mean, hot and cold is part of it, but also this translation is. I don't really like a lot of the stuff in this translation sometimes, but this is the free one I could find. It's more about dry versus moist, dry things versus wet things. So, does warm air rise and cold air fall? Yeah, that's true. This hot and cold is like, sure, it's like an opposition, but when it comes to what these guys are talking about, it's more like dry and wet, that type of thing. I like that. I'm stealing that as a theme for a game. You know what? All of the Presocratics are copyright free, so you could take whatever you want. I'm gonna move on. Hot rises, cold falls. Let's do Anaximander. He has some more interesting things going on. Let me read his quote here. I'm just wondering if they pondered other conclusions from that experimental proof. Well, let me mention this. These, I don't think you were here because I was like waiting 15 minutes for everyone to show up. But these are just fragments of books, and nobody wrote anything down. So this is all like, you see how I have Theophrastos on Anaximander. This was all part of the oral tradition. They would just go and say this stuff in like the middle of town, or maybe an academic setting in a room, and these doxographers, Theophrastus and Simplicius and other people, just wrote down what they said, and then so it's all secondhand of what they said, and then a bunch of it is lost and burned, and like they find the documents and they're like decayed and words are missing, and then they have to translate it and it's a dead language. It's like a whole laundry list of things that are like in the way of them trying to figure out what these people actually thought, so it's entirely possible that their ideas make more sense if they wrote them down themselves, or if we had the right translation, or if we had all of the translation, because Thales is just like a couple fragments of things he said which other people wrote down. So you do have to keep that in mind. All of this is very tentative, what we have from the Presocratics. It's not like we have whole works that Plato wrote down. It's honestly a totally different way of approaching a text. Lots of ambiguity, lots of uncertainty, just even around like what we actually know about these guys. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Ambitious flame versus ice, but with air is what makes it tricky. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Herschel. Like, logic isn't big at the time and won't be until Aristotle comes around and becomes the first to reason out logic. But they had to have thought of other conclusions that would have made some better thoughts. Well, in my opinion, I don't think that they were dumb. I think that this might be like a weak argument, if you want to say, or something, but I think that a lot of what we have is lost and secondhand, and I think that there's probably more going on than we think. And if you want to talk about logical thinking, they were still coming out of this mythological thinking, which has its logic to it, but is not the same type of reasoning that we use in modern society. And it's not any less logical, it's just a different system of thought. It's not inferior to our system. It's a different way of being and viewing the world. So I don't know. That's something that we have in modern society is like a problem thinking from other cultures' viewpoints. It's like I'm not trying to say this about you, Paul, but it's like a colonialist attitude to think like, oh, these ancient like mythological societies are so stupid and inferior to us, like logical, scientific thinkers, and all of this is like a process. I don't want to say like it's not about stupidity. It's about them like working on themselves. That's what philosophy is about, working on their viewpoints. And I think that we should be careful, honestly, about insulting or comparing our our systems of thinking and too like too drastically, or thinking that one's superior to the other when it's just different. Let me look at my comments here. It's like this even could be completely wrong. Exactly. It could. I mean, it's not completely wrong. It has an idea of what they thought, but there's a lot of things that are lost. I was talking about the concept of heat rising, cold falling, but that ignores air entirely. I don't know how to incorporate air beyond hot steam. He's calling your ancestors out, Paul. I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just saying there are differences in the way that we believe, the way that we live in those different cultures. And we need to be careful because, I mean, especially as our positions in the world, our identities, and our place in history of coming at mythological societies as inferior, because there's a lot of danger in that, and a lot of that danger led to terrible colonialist attitudes. But we could talk about that more another time. I'm going to move on to Anaximander. Anaximander, his theory of the substance of the universe is apeiron, which means boundless or infinite. This is Theophrastus on what Anaximander thought. Anaximander of Miletus, son of Praxiteles, a fellow citizen and associate of Thales, said that the material cause and first element of things was the infinite, he being the first to introduce this name of the material cause. He says it is neither water nor any other of the so-called elements, but a substance different from them, which is infinite, from which arise all the heavens and the worlds within them. Okay, so this is interesting because this substance is not really physical like the other guys. This is why I separate him from Anaximenes and Thales, because he's in their idiom, he's doing discourse with them, but at the same time he comes up with this abstract substance which is still physical, but it's called the infinite. And this is also something to do with Pythagoreans because they were working with numbers and infinity and stuff like that. So I find this idea like vague but also really interesting, because it's like the idea of one God but without all the political bullshit and like the righteous fury that he's like being a dick to everyone all the time. And I find it difficult in our society and throughout my whole life to like separate the idea of like theism or idea of a god from like all the cultural trappings and the historical difficulties. But Anaximander's apeiron substance is kind of compelling because it's just so elegant. It doesn't have any like things attached to it. It has these like notions of circle of life, which I'm about to read about. And I find that I don't know. For some reason, it speaks to me of like a simpler time before the idea of God became so politicized, and it was like an answer to how things work in the universe. It wasn't just like all of this bullshit, like fucking crazy. um, I don't know what to call them. What are they? The Baptist church people like revving their motorcycles at soldiers' funerals and stuff, like dumb shit like that. But yeah, so I find this interesting because of that, and that's a personal anecdote for me. Um, there's a difference in culture, but it's not colonialist to say their arguments are riddled with modern day logical fallacies. Yeah, no, I was not saying that. I wasn't trying to say that. If I did, I didn't mean that. I think it's I think it's colonialist to say they're inferior or to insult them. Um, that's what I was trying to say. And I didn't know if you were being, I couldn't tell. I mean, it's on a chat. I couldn't tell like how you were meaning it when you were saying like they were stupid or they sounded like so dumb compared to Plato, which I mean, they have a lot less complexity in some ways. But I mean, then I explained all the things we have lost from them, and the translations are difficult. So that might have changed the way that you felt about their intelligence. But um, um, yeah, I couldn't tell if you were like actually insulting them or if you were just insulting their arguments. But in some ways, insulting their arguments um, is insulting their sort of mythological way of life and being that they have that like totally comes out of their culture. I was joking. Okay. Well, it's also important. I mean, I'm glad that sometimes I don't understand jokes, especially not over like chat or a text message. Um, but it is a real thing. Even though it's a joke, it is a real thing. Like for me to bring that up, and it has this whole history and everything. And I should have had um, some kind of explanation prepared in my. I didn't do. I mean, I tried to do a preface, but I didn't have everything in it that I realize I should have now. Um, but some form of inferiority in comparison to what we have now. Um, yeah, I think that this is a difficult conversation um, to have as modern people in Western culture who helped colonize the world. Because when you colonize the world, you destroy cultures and thoughts. Um, and there's a lot of bad blood there. And there are newer postmodern thinkers who think on this a lot about the difference between mythological thinking and like logical modern thinking. And for now, I have so much more to do that I'm going to like put this on the shelf. But it's a very sticky, tricky subject to discuss. I'm not going to say inferiority, but the differences between systems of thought and ways of being that are cultural. So I'm going to shelve that for now so that I can keep doing this because I still have a good bit to do. Christianity destroyed a lot on the old ways. Why is it important that they are inferior? Like anything in life, we've advanced beyond this way of thinking, but it's not that we need to forget about it. Yeah. Um, it's just there's a myth about advancement and progress in from the Enlightenment on, that we don't do myth anymore, and now we have big facts and big data, and we know about the fucking Crab Nebula that's 20 million light years away, but myths are still extremely prevalent in our society, and mythological thinking is often disguised and reordered and renamed other things, and a lot of our facts are often supported by discourses that can be proven wrong if other discourses came up and challenged them. But such hegemonic institutions such as science or other things that construct our reality in many ways cannot be challenged. So it's very tricky, and it's not something that I was expecting to get into here. A lot of myths that survive today, for example, have gone through the Christian culture. It's true. I see a filter. Myth is actually making a return. Fake news. Yeah, you see, this is a whole nother like topic that I didn't plan out and was not going to get into. So I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I do know some philosophers who have interesting thoughts on the subject, who could contribute to this discussion, but I got other things to do. So let me move on. Anaximander, this is more Theophrastus on Anaximander. And into that from which they take their rise, they pass away once more, as is meet, for they make reparation and satisfaction to one another for their injustice according to the ordering of time, as he says, in these somewhat poetical terms. And besides this, there was an eternal motion, in which was brought about the origin of the worlds. So this is super important. It's really interesting, this aspect of justice. When I was discussing this in my ancient Greek study abroad in Turkey, the group had a really interesting discussion about how every act of creation is also an act of destruction. This is kind of separate from the justice thing, but also has to do with it. So they're like these balances. First of all, everything that is created must also be destroyed as part of the justice of the universe, because materials, space was used. You have this sort of contract when you were created that you will also be destroyed, and honoring that is justice in some ways at the most basic level. So it's interesting to think, like, besides the obvious like usage of living materials and vital resources, like creation of anything takes up space where something else was living. So you've like replaced that life that was there in that ecosystem, and the creation of this thing or being determines the use of all those materials and the existence of those parts in a certain assemblage or a certain way of being that destroys the possibility of other uses of that space or those materials and beings. So it's really interesting, I think, to think about that, and how to keep the order of creation in the universe that eventually must also be destroyed. And it returns to its most basic materials, where it started from, in this kind of circle of life type thing. Additionally, it's always necessary for creation and destruction to happen in the unfolding of time, and adding time into philosophy is like fucking huge. It's like, it's gonna be crazy for like Plato and for later philosophers to deal with time, and think about existence and time and all that stuff. So I think considering the consequences of what we consume in modern society, what we create and destroy, thinking about this sort of justice of life and death is can help us keep our minds connected to the earth and that things are alive and everything passes away. I mean, possibly this was like an early way of dealing with grief for them or something. Yeah, I find it very interesting to include justice in creation and destruction and also time. Let me look at can of worms. So this would dispel some form of idea of creation from nothing viewpoint then. Yeah, I mean pretty much all of the ancient Greeks. I can't think of one. I mean, I don't know all of them, but all the ones I cover and I'm familiar with do not believe in creation ex nihilo. That is, for me, in my knowledge, my understanding of history, of thought, is a very Christian, well, not Christian, Abrahamic and Christian idea. Even though the original translation of the Torah has things that can challenge creation ex nihilo, yeah, the Presocratics definitely challenged that, and yeah, I mean, even like I was talking about last week, if you were still here, Paul, I know you left at some point. Hesiod's theogony, chaos is not. I mean, chaos came out of nowhere, but at the same time, chaos is being and non-being at the same time, and is like the substratum of time and space. And it's and then like chaos as like a sort of whole is like a condition of possibility for Gaia to come to be. So it's like out of nothing, but also it's more complicated than like there was nothing and then there was God. It's more there's more meat to it that has some different things to say, and you're welcome to challenge that. But those are my thoughts on that. So yeah, the inclusion of time in the theory is a big change even from Hesiod's theogony, because they're all like eternal gods, and there is like this sort of passage of time in Hesiod's theogony, but like the gods live forever. I mean, most of them live forever. They can be killed, and the Titans can be killed, but like the original timeless ones, the eternal ones like Chaos, Gaia, Oranos, Oceanus, and the rest are timeless, and there's like this sort of timelessness for the gods, which Anaximander is not like making a statement like the gods live in time too and they pass away, like, but just bringing up time at all is important because it brings in motion and uncertainty and the speculative posture that philosophers take up in their thinking, and it's going to be so big for Heraclitus, Plato, Hegel, Kant, Heidegger, just lots and lots of philosophers. So yeah, let me see what else I have. Yeah, I'm gonna read this part. Like he's nothing and something at the same time, so you can disprove it, can't disprove it. Yeah, that kind of thing. It's this paradox of being. I believe nothing is immortal because everything can change. Yeah, exactly. Let me read my next quote here. I've been doing this for an hour. This is Aristotle on Anaximander. Further, there cannot be a single simple body which is infinite, either as some hold one distinct from the elements which they then derive from it, or without this qualification. For there are some who make this, i.e., a body distinct from elements, the infinite, and not air or water, in order that other things may not be destroyed by their infinity. They are in opposition one to another. Air is cold, water moist, fire hot, and therefore, if any one of them were infinite, the rest would have ceased to be by this time. Accordingly, they say that what is infinite is something other than the elements, and from it the elements arise. So, My Immortal by Evanescence. Uh, yeah. So this is why, to deal with these oppositions of the elements, Aristotle is commenting on Anaximander here, saying Anaximander came up with this to sort of, um, like, no one of the elements can be the basis of the universe, because that would make them like infinite, and then the other elements would not exist as they do. So there has to be something else that the elements came out of, and something that can encompass all of them. So it has to be this sort of infinite plurality type deal, to be able to deal with all of these, handle all these elements at once, and to have created them and destroy them and bring them back and keep this cycle of life going. I gotta go. Talk to you later. Okay. See you, Paul. Um, yeah, so there's another quote I want to read. This is Simplicius on Anaximander. Those who assumed innumerable worlds, examples Anaximander, Leucippus, Democritus, and at a later day Epicurus, held that they came into being and passed away ad infinitum, some always coming into being and others passing away. So this is another thing that happens with the inclusion of time, is people really start to think about the idea of becoming. They don't just think about like eternal being, with the gods and other things like that. They think about becoming, lots of change. How do things change over the course of time, and what is happening around us? Like every day, things seem the same, but they're slightly different. And yeah, they start to realize this, and this is something, that will be a big debate later, like being versus becoming. And Anaximander inspired other thinkers. Like he was the first one to say like there are these little worlds happening all around us, coming into being and passing away, like at all points in time. So Democritus will think out like the universal substance, in that's the beginning of atomic theory. And Anaximander, um, yeah, I find this interesting as a commentary, like on the complicated weavings of life and death that happen like every day. Because sometimes it's hard to think about how people are like always being born and living every day, and like there are like millions of bugs that die every day, and like they're also reborn, and like how does that work? But it's just like from ants to like nations, like everything is always coming into being and passing away, and not in like one instant. I mean, it can happen, seem to be instantaneous, but it's always like constant deterioration and constant renewal. And I remember sitting at this old hotel where we were having class in Turkey, and my professor pointed at this like old brick wall, and he's telling us like asking us if it was moving, and we were like, no, not really. I don't see anything. But he was just telling us like how it's in the middle, falling down like right in front of us, and even as soon as it was put into the earth, it was falling down. And um, this is something that's really important to philosophy, that we are always forever trying to forget our condition as beings in time. And that will be a big metaphor for Heraclitus, who's the next philosopher. And it's huge. I mean, philosophers put off like our existence in time for hundreds, maybe over 1,000 years, because it's this sort of safety mechanism. People don't want to think about it. It's too complicated. So they go with these other ideas of being, and stuff like that. Um, I don't agree, but I will follow with it, because there is historical political context I'm only vaguely familiar with. I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about, Herschel. So this is connected slightly to something I was talking about last week, which is the self, from the theogony, which is like the self as monster, the self as multiple, the self is changing over time, and this is something that's really big, becoming, because we have these ideas of our essential selves, especially in modern times. We're individuals, and thinking of yourself differently in this way is a big deal, and trying to like think of yourself as becoming this other person at the same time as like keeping your same personality traits every day in different points of time is complicated, and Anaximander doesn't go that far, but it will become about that in like the future thinking of philosophy. The philosophy about opposites, like the water moist, fire hot, water cold being opposites. You don't think that fire and water are opposites because of a historical political context? Is that what you're saying? No, he added fire hot. Water moist. Yeah. And the third thing, I forget, that's cold. You want me to go back, or? Oh, you're talking about Aristotle's representation of Anaximander. Air is cold, water is moist, and fire is hot. Yeah, I haven't really done too much Aristotle because they didn't allow us to at my school, because philosophy's kind of moved on from Aristotle. It was like dominated by him for a long time, and with the post-structuralists, it has changed a lot. So yeah, I don't ever find myself agreeing with Aristotle that much. Um, I don't know why he's doing these oppositions specifically. I'm sure Aristotle has like longer quotes on Anaximander that would maybe explain this. I don't know why he thinks air is only cold. Um, I know why he thinks water is moist and fire is hot. Um, I'm not sure. Um, I don't I don't really do Aristotle that much, but um, yeah, I mean I agree with you. Air air is not cold all the time. Uh, yeah, I don't know what that's about. Something I want to include at the end here, which is kind of funny and interesting, um, and I kind of wish Paul was here because I want to show him how smart that they were, even though the thinking style and the way of being is different. It's kind of hard not to laugh at, but it's also really fascinating to me. This is Theophrastus on Anaximander's Origin of Man. I'm going to read it. He says, living creatures arose from the moist element as it was evaporated by the sun. Man was like another animal, namely a fish, in the beginning. The first animals were produced in the moisture, each enclosed in a prickly bark. As they advanced in age, they came out upon the drier part. When the bark broke off, they survived for a short time. Further, he says that originally man was born from animals of another species. His reason is that while other animals quickly find food by themselves, man alone requires a lengthy period of suckling. Hence, had he been originally as he is now, he would have never survived. He declares that at first human beings arose in the insides of fishes, and after having been reared like sharks and become capable of protecting themselves, they were finally cast ashore and took to land. So, this is something that I remember I was first reading like a year and a half ago, and we were all like kind of laughing and joking about it, but it's really fascinating because life did start in the water, you know? I mean, we weren't like, I'm not sure if I could say we were at first arose from the insides of fishes, but somehow our ancestors are not. I mean, somehow our ancestors are from the water. Like, if you go back far enough, there's something somewhere that's like, I don't know, some germ or something that was in the water. And that's really fascinating. Stuff about the bark breaking off, I'm not sure about that. But Anaximander has theories about evolution. He has theories about environmental adaptation, and such that he can be considered like this proto-early Darwinist figure, which isn't like that important to his philosophy, but I find really fascinating. They're on the right track, yes. So, it's kind of entertaining and kind of interesting. I like it. I included it because it's a little bit out there, but it's relatable at the same time. We're gonna take a little break. I'm gonna show you these pictures, and then I'm gonna do a bathroom break. So, what year is it? What month is it? It's September 2020. In May 2019, I went to Turkey, and lots of ancient Greek settlements were in Turkey. They had beaten out the tribes or colonized them in some sort of way and taken land there. And so this is the ancient amphitheater at Miletus. I was there. This is what's left there. There was a whole city. Some of these stones are from the amphitheater. Some of them are possibly from buildings. There are other foundations of buildings left. And, you know, here it is from the top. I went all the way to the top. There's a lot of fucking steps, but I was like down here or somewhere taking the picture by these stones, the first one. And I just think I couldn't stop thinking about time when I was there and how everything passes away and how we try so hard to to like build structures that will stand the test of time and to convince ourselves that like we will be here for forever, or for like is I mean not that we I don't know, like they still like knew that they were gonna die, but and yet still we try and build these structures, and this structure is, I'm not even sure, over 2,000 years old, but it's still there, and there's like still life. You can see these flowers and weeds growing in it, and there's like goats living around it, and like all these birds and these trees back here is like a crazy amount of birds, and it's like I'd never been to a ruin before that, so I was really, I don't know, it like hits you. Like people used to live here. They spent thousands of hours building a giant amphitheater to put on plays, to have announcements, and they built their houses and did these intricate patterns and made a language, and now they're gone. They're dead. We only have fragments, deteriorated fragments of what's left of them. And So for them to introduce becoming and time into philosophy and into public discourse is it's huge, because they never knew that this dude would be there 2,000 years from now and they would all be dead and all their great works would be in ruins. I mean, they, like, of course, had that feeling, but you try and hide that every day. You try and cover it up. And philosophy does struggle with that for a long time. And we still struggle with that every day as human beings. And yeah, I find that really super interesting. These are, let's talk about the life there. These flowers, these red poppy type flowers, grow everywhere in the ruins, and they're very beautiful. And very interesting symbolism there. Regardless of 200 or 2,000 years, time will erode all, and something new will arise to replace the lost and forgotten. This is why life is precious. Every day is precious. Herschel getting so sentimental over here. You're right. It's and it's easy to say that, but to go and see it and experience it in front of you, um, it's a different thing. It's a whole different kind of revelation and moment of reflection that's even hard to describe, because I cannot comprehend like all of the years that passed and that the person that I am, I never thought I would leave the U.S. and I never thought I would see something like that. But yeah, it was crazy. Um, Even though I just said all that stuff, I still feel like I didn't convey it right. The feeling is it's uncanny and it's absurd, that so much time had passed. Poppies became a symbol for fallen soldiers in World War One. Oh, Andre the Giant fan. It hits you differently. One thing to know, another thing to feel. Beautiful pictures. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, thanks for being here. I think you're here in the background. Um, I'm I'm gonna take a bathroom break and get some water, and I'll be right back for the next um, the next philosopher. Okay, everybody left. That's fine. Um, let's see. Sunset isn't back yet. Maybe I just go talk to her some more because nobody's here. All right, people, sunset. Um, you haven't said anything, sunset. Feel free to ask questions. I'm going to move on to Heraclitus, the most interesting, probably the most I have to say about. I wish Paul was here to see how interesting Presocratics are, but okay, let's go. So I'm going to read his first fragment. Through this word, though this word is true evermore, yet men are unable to understand it when they hear it for the first time, as before they have heard it at all. For though all things come to pass in accordance with this word, men seem as if they had no experience of them. When they make trial of words and deeds such as I set forth, dividing each thing according to its kind and showing how it truly is. But other men know not what they are doing when awake, even as they forget what they do in sleep. So, this translation for word is massively important. This word in ancient Greek is logos. So it can be translated as word, reason, wisdom, saying, and a whole slew of other things. It's really big. It's really, really big for philosophy. So Heraclitus is known as like this grandfather of flux and becoming in philosophy, but at the same time, he is the first to use this extremely important concept of logos. And I'm gonna translate it here as reason. So it's gonna be really big for Plato, Aristotle, and the Enlightenment movement later. Heraclitus uses it a bit differently than the other philosophers will use it. For him, it's like this universal guiding principle. In some ways, it's like language. In some ways, it's wisdom and reason. I think for him, it can be both personal and universal. Like everyone has command of speech and reason and wisdom for the most part. And so this universal speech element of logical and reasoning, people like access it, but not everyone has the same like skill level with it, and they need to like hone it with usage through discussion and philosophy. So using reason as like this universal principle had not been thought of before, and Heraclitus really changed like the course of Western thought and philosophy by introducing it, because things start to become more rational, perhaps less mythological, as I was discussing earlier, with Paul, which I'm glad that I had that discussion because I need to keep that in mind. I know it was like impromptu, and it didn't get too heated, which was good, and it took up some time, and it was like tangent, but that's philosophy. Okay, tangents definitely come up all the time. Yeah, so one thing to understand, like, it's logos is different. Like, it's different for Heraclitus, and it's different for Plato, Aristotle, and definitely reason is different from reason in the Enlightenment period is different from Heraclitus's reason or logos. So one thing to understand about logos here, especially for Heraclitus's idea of it, is the political implications. So I mentioned in the preface that he was going to be a lot more political than his predecessors. So when Heraclitus invokes logos, it concerns this difference that he loves to make, which is the difference between being heard and listened to by his fellow citizens. So philosophy, I'm not exactly sure. I always try to picture it like with Thales and Anaximander and them. Like, was it like in the public square, or was it in like a private building? I mean, they didn't really have privacy as much back then. Not the same notions of privacy that we have today. So I think that it was like open to the public, but Heraclitus really tries to get the public and like lots of people involved like every day in philosophy. Is this sort of like pre-Socratic figure. It's kind of an example for Socrates, and he wishes not only to be heard by his citizens and just have his words and argument picked apart in like bad faith, but he wants to have listeners who like take in his ideas with genuine care and interest. And so he just seriously wants to go around like to common people in the city of Ephesus, and ask them like, how should we live together? Like, how is it that we are existing in this life here together? And but I mean, this is like a really early image of how philosophy becomes this disruptive force of everyday common life. And they're just like, we have, and this is, I might need to backpedal just a beat. Like, for the many people in normal life, everything goes on without these questions. They have duties and responsibility, and part of that is because of our existence in time. We're always being pushed forward in time. We can't stop and think and ask questions. There are needs of our personal needs, our family, our kids, our friends, needs and responsibilities of the societies we live in, and nobody has time to do this. Time is always a big factor, and so they're just like, we don't have time for this. Get away from me, you smelly old hermit. And for the discourse of philosophy, such like an early distinction is like such a big deal, and Heraclitus becomes this wise outsider like persona, which it's like in his writing, but actually in real life he like lived in the mountains and went to be away from people to think. And so yeah, and he's up to this project of philosophy which very few people want to take seriously. So he really does, as I mentioned earlier, start this split with philosophy has with the public in the portrayal of philosophers as agitators, and just interfering in like everyday life, asking too many questions, that type of thing. So at the end of this, but other men do not know what they are doing when awake, even as they forget what they do in sleep. So there are more on this. I'm going to read these other fragments and then interpret them, discuss them. So we must follow the common, yet though my word is common, the many live as if they had wisdom of their own. This is about people not listening to him. Fragment 26. Man kindles a light for himself in the nighttime, when he has died but is alive. The sleeper whose vision has been put out lights up from the dead. He that is awake lights up from the sleeping. Fragment 27. There awaits men when they die such things as they look not for nor dream of. So he has these kind of almost spooky, like cynical view of other people in Ephesus and in the world. He's kind of like the first woke dude ever. That's my stupid joke for the day. So this metaphor of sleep and death for like people who don't think and for the common people is really interesting. It's still prevalent today, like people saying like "wake up, sheeple" or whatever. So it's funny and interesting to find it in such a common metaphor in such an old fragment. But yeah, essentially you can kind of see the metaphor. Common people walk around like they're asleep, like they're sleepwalking, and they don't think about their lives and the actions and consequences that their behavior has. And meanwhile, those who are thoughtful are awake and in the light and study philosophy and all that jazz. So it is interesting also, not just for like wake up sheeple, but like for technology, wokeness, and zombies, I think, because all of that stuff is like who's aware of what's going on around them, who practices mindfulness and is paying attention to like their civic duty or thinking about their self, reflecting on behaviors they have. And technology and like media makes us into these kind of drones and zombies, where we don't think for ourselves. And zombies, of course, are like the common film and like media representation of thoughtless, brainless drones who just consume like media. They consume brains, but like metaphorically, zombies like are obsessed with consumption and the body and not living like the life of the mind like a philosopher would, or like reading and studying books, that kind of thing. Additionally, he says that when one is sleeping, they're both alive and dead, uh, which is just interesting, man. Like Heraclitus loves to like play with duality and paradox, and this is like a really interesting example of that. I think these metaphors also like further cement him as this like old curmudgeon who's like really cynical. He thinks about death and like watches people sleep and shit, and like thinks about like how they're like dead but alive, and like then goes and writes about it somewhere, like says it in the public square, and people are like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? Hail Duke Nukem, if I could pin your woke comment, I would. That's an interesting divide. Watches people sleep, sad face. Yeah, I don't know if he actually does that, but I mean, he wasn't watching himself sleep, so somebody, when he was meditating on this paradox and quote, was like, he was watching him sleep. I don't know. So let's move on to my favorite quote from any of the pre-Socratics. Super fascinating, cryptic, and interesting. let me read it. Let me read these quotes. This world, which is the same for all, no one of gods or men has made, but it was ever, is now, and ever shall be an ever-living fire, with measures of it kindling and measures going out. Fragment 12. You cannot step twice into the same rivers, for fresh waters are ever flowing in upon you. We step and do not step into the same rivers. We are and we are not. Okay, so this shit is... This is crazy stuff. When I first heard about this, read about it, we had to talk about it in class, I had no idea what to say. The first fragment is I said that Heraclitus has a departure from his predecessors, and he does in some ways, in many ways. But this first quote, he talks about how essentially he is doing discourse with Thales and Anaximenes and Anaximander. But I think it's more ironic. He doesn't have the same intentions. He says the basis of the universe is a fire, but it's an ever-living eternal fire. It's not literally fire. I think that he's being more ironic, and he's definitely not as empirical as they are. He's not this astrologist scientist. He's much more interested in politics of the city he's living in. Fire, more than anything else, in my interpretation, is a metaphor for Heraclitus's theorizing about our state of being according to Chaos. So fire is always moving and changing, and it has this presence that is incredibly imposing, but at the same time it's ghostly. You could run through fire, and it's there, but it's not at the same time. But it's the most, it's the thing that's most there. If you think about something you don't want to touch or you don't want to get close to, it's I'm not gonna walk into that fire, but at the same time you could just, if you are fast enough, you could just run through it. It's crazy. So fire is this perfect paradoxical metaphor for how Heraclitus thinks that we exist. Especially with this chaos figure of duality, of being and non-being, you essentially combine that with Anaxagoras' movement and time, and you get Heraclitus' idea of being. You have the substratum of chaos, which is just a whole of being and non-being, and then you add in Anaxagoras' time and infinity, and Heraclitus' way of existence is becoming. We exist in time as beings that are always becoming and changing. So he puts forth existence in time as this paradoxical state in which and he doesn't say all of this. This is me expounding on it and thinking of how other philosophers build upon it, but he's essentially saying something like this: consciousness certainly exists, but only in moments of time, which are always changing. So I'm going to insert some explanation into the quote here. You cannot step into the same rivers twice, meaning you cannot live the same moment over again. And we are and we are not. We are existing now, but now was just then, and we cannot be that exact person in that exact moment again, ever again. So I think that I find it really chilling to find such wisdom from such an early philosopher, from some old cranky dude thousands of years ago. Firewalker Heraclitus. Yeah. This is an aside that I was thinking about. I don't know if you guys who's here. Herschel's here and Brady's here. I don't know probably just Herschel. I don't know how familiar you are with the Dark Souls mythos, but it all has to do with fire, and this like original fire and the world starting in flame and war and almost all of like the mythos of Dark Souls could be directly tied to Heraclitus, like how it started and how it like continues through strife and war and all of that stuff. I don't know. I know that it's like Japanese and they have all this like possibly Japanese influenced myths and stuff in there, but um, in my interpretation, Dark Souls is straight Heraclitus. If anybody is interested in that, but yeah, so I'm gonna move on. Does anybody have anything to say about that? Because I think that is like probably the most important part of this whole discussion. Age of Dragons to Age of Fire to Age of Darkness. That Jim is preventing from happening. Yeah, that sounds about right. I don't know who Jim is. Oh, what's his name? Not Jim. You put Jim, but his name is something with a G. Gwyn. Gwyn. Yeah, he typed his name wrong. Jim. Um, I've been talking fast, and I didn't make a lot of questions for this because I just did it all last night. I forgot I was going to pause for questions. I think that this is an okay spot um, to pause for like any discussions or questions. But yeah. Gwyn. It's like GWYN or something. Something like that. Like even though Heraclitus seems quite interesting out of the bunch so far. Yes, he is the most interesting. I love him. He's very interesting. I have the most to say about him, honestly, out of all the people. He only has like about 120 fragments, but there's a lot to squeeze out of them. He puts a lot of work in just with that little amount. Yeah. Honestly, like Paul was getting me off topic, but it's nice to have more questions and um, stuff like that. Even if I just like to generate discussion, I haven't been able to get the questions that I want for these, but yeah. I don't know how long to wait for. One thing I'm thinking of. Okay, Herschel's got something. Our fascination with fire. True. There's a whole myth about Prometheus stealing fire from Zeus and giving it to man, and Zeus forbidding us from having fire because of Prometheus's trick he plays on him. And fire in a lot of mythological societies is worshipped, and I mean, it definitely changed our society to have fire, life, warmth, emotion, etc. Yeah, fire is a lot of symbolism and not even beyond symbolism, like the actual experience of being around a fire, of having it in your life and cooking with it, and yeah, the warmth of fire is such a big emotional metaphor. And also its duality is danger, but also safety around the fire from like night predators, and it helps you to get food that you can eat. And yeah, it flickers and moves like we change throughout our lives. Exactly. I was talking about that as him using fire as a metaphor. But you put it in a good way too. There is an adventure book series you might be interested in. Oh, really? You wanna post a link? Prehistorical in nature. I'm going to go to the next slide while Partial posts this link. Okay, next topic for Heraclitus. This is about war between the one and the many, harmony and strife. Let's read the fragment. Couples are things whole and things not whole. What is drawn together and what is drawn asunder. The harmonious and the discordant. The one is made up of all things, and all things issue from the one. Fragment 80. We must know that war is common to all, and strife is justice, and that all things come into being and pass away through strife. Okay, so he loves to bring up strife as this universal sort of problem and like force that is around. It's interesting because he brings up the one a lot, but also he's always talking about duality and playing with paradox. So I'm going to talk about that now. Strife is essentially Heraclitus's expansion upon and response to Anaximander's justice principle, which we were talking about earlier. My interpretation is that he's giving the principle more of a political twist, for instead of the justice and injustice concerning creation and destruction, he uses like just strife, which is also conflicts between people and possibly inner conflicts as well. So you can hear him echoing Anaximander by using this language of coming into being and passing away. So that's definitely taking from Anaximander's Apeiron justice principle concerning creation and destruction. The one here he's referring to is not exactly clear. Let me see. Like when he's talking about the one is made up of all things and all things issue from the one. I was just reading this translation this week. So I have like a book that I'm more familiar with, but I can't use because of copyright. So the other translation, I looked into it. It doesn't use like this vague one signifier or whatever. So even though he does like use one here, he said it's made up of all things. So it's like still a plurality, but also one, which is him, I think, invoking chaos. And this translation is sort of vague at times, and I don't always like it. So I think the interpretation I have of him stands, but the translation is just kind of vague and off. So the next part that he brings up harmonious and the discordant. Harmony is really important to the Pythagoreans, who, like I said, I couldn't cover this week, and I'm going to get to him next week. So the quote is also important because of its introduction of like oppositional thinking, which is like harmonious and discordant things. Like some things oppose each other, some things go together in this life. So this is big in many ways. I'm going to go through them. For one, taking up positions in philosophy, like an argumentative position, a logical position with a thesis, is like defines like almost all of philosophy, especially in its early stages. So like you could see like how it works. Basically, like someone makes a claim, another person opposes it, and they duke it out until they get some kind of conclusion, or they don't get a conclusion, something like that. So arguing in rhetoric in this way in philosophy is like really important for a long time, until like Hegel and the post-structuralism movement changes how analysis and argument can be done. But yeah, so oppositions is really important for like the heart of philosophy. And so the other important aspect is thinking in opposites itself. I did not mention like, oh wait, I did mention this. My notes are not correct here. I mentioned the opposing forces in the Milesian cosmogonies earlier, like wet and moist compared to dry. So this is like the earliest example of an opposition that puts people at odds with each other, and like opposing arguments, like dry is opposite from moist. Like we know that, we have an intuitive sense of that. So yeah, Thales was doing all the moisture stuff, and then everyone else was like, no, there can't be water as the main principle because everything is like, there's dry stuff. So how does that make sense? And so it sounds silly, but taking up this like opposing posturing in arguments is, like I said, super key to philosophy, but also it's one of its greatest faults, which is why people tried to change it. So when you're like in the classroom or doing a paper, stuff like that, writing a book about philosophy, like getting a super opposing point up is, and like staying in that and camping down and like sticking to your guns is like, it doesn't facilitate discussion, and without discussion there isn't any philosophy. So besides that, like just in the classroom and like preventing like progress and deliberation between philosophers and in the academic world, oppositional thinking historically has led to like many wars, violence, and death, because strife just comes up like as a result of opposites in like the literal world. Like water and fire like are like against each other, they are opposing forces, and many other oppositions of strife like predator versus prey and things of that nature. They're like natural and they're necessary for life and death, but it's very like a literal and figurative issue for philosophy, and philosophy's had to come to terms with it over like many years, because it's prevented certain thoughts from being thought in philosophy, and when certain thoughts are thought and people become extremely opposed to them, it's caused ideological wars and religions that have caused massacres when there are differences in opposing religious views. So yeah, and it's interesting because our lives are defined by conflict, like both big and small, but in many times peaceful resolution is only possible through words and negotiation. But a lot of times words can be the cause of strife from the very beginning. So it has this duality to it that is, there's a lot of danger to making these like claims of truth and knowledge that can crop up and like cause cultures to clash and become oppositional and kill each other. And I think that Heraclitus recognizes this issue because he tries to break up this illusion that some things are more harmonious and other things are entrenched in opposition like forever. I mean, still, like, yeah, some things go together better, like peanut butter and jelly. Like, nobody's gonna say, like, dog shit and jelly go together. I mean, maybe for a dog, I guess. I don't know. Or a fly. I don't know. Like, it's some. Maybe he's right. Like, maybe it's all about perspective. Like, and he's trying to say, like, even though these things seem that they are together, really they're not. It's just perspective. Things are drawn together and things are drawn apart. But they're all made up of all things, and all things come from the same substance eventually. So it's going to cause strife, but we all started from the same point, and we're going to be back to it at the end too. So he uses this imagery on this next slide to shit. Is this? Oh, I think I messed up my slide. It's okay. This is more about the one and stuff. I'm gonna get to the imagery in a second. Bane of understanding and the only way to reach understanding. That's correct. Good way to put it. Man, you did take philosophy classes, didn't you, Herschel? I do have one more slide I forgot about. Fragment 33. It is the law to obey the counsel of one. Fragment 41. Wisdom is one thing. It is to know the thought by which all things are steered through all things. 50. It is wise to hearken not to me, but to my word, and to confess that all things are one. 44. The people must fight for its laws as for its walls. So this is more stuff about the one versus the many, because there are so many like opinions in life, and somehow we have to agree like on convention and laws to live together, you know? So yeah, eventually it's wise and important to remember what he's saying, essentially to listen to each other's logos, their words and reasons, and to eventually like negotiate your position and realize that all things are one. Sometimes we're saying the same things in slightly different ways, and don't even realize it. Sometimes it's more... Oh, that was Andre? Sorry. Sorry, Brady. Your names are the same color in my chat, so that's confusing me a bit. Yeah, so this sort of wisdom that like we can do deliberation and discussion, we're not as different as we think we are. Like our points have some, even if they oppose, somehow they can reach a harmonic state, and that's important. The last one, the people must fight for its laws as for its walls. I think that's a really cool one. I didn't do any philosophy of law this time. I squeezed it in last time. I know it's boring and strange to think of philosophy of law, but it's necessary. I'm not going to get into it too much this time. It's just kind of obvious, like laws are holding us all together, like convention and this contract that we have with each other. So it's interesting to think about like how early this guy is saying this stuff. Like this is like protest right here. This is like your laws are come under they come under conflict, they come under attack, like laws against abortion or gay marriage, and like you have to fight for convention, you have to fight for the laws to stay the way that they are, and you know, foreign governments will try and change your attitudes and your laws, and so you have to fight for it like as if your life depended on it. And there is something profound about that. There's more to say about it, but I don't have that many notes prepared on it, so I'm gonna move on to this imagery I wanted to show you guys. Let me read the fragments on this slide. Fragment 48. The bow is called life. but its work is death. 51. Men do not know what is at variance agrees with itself. It is an attunement of opposite tensions, like that of the bow and the lyre. A lyre is like a lute, like an old harp type thing. I guess it's more of a harp. But like a mini harp, not a giant one. Fragment 64. It is the thunderbolt that steers the course of all things. So what I was getting to, this imagery, before I interrupted myself because I forgot one of my slides. So yes, as I mentioned before, Heraclitus has this like political bent that the other philosophers before him don't have. So beyond just like opposing arguments and physical objects, there are, as I've already mentioned a little bit, opposing armies, opposing cultures, and ideas of how we should live. So it's really interesting. He uses this idea of tension, tension as like a force in the world. So there's tension between culture and people, and tensions between natural beings and forces in the world. But in the end, we're like really made out of the same stuff, but sometimes following opposite courses of action. Just as like a bow is made out of wood and string, but used for war, while the lyre or harp is also made out of wood and string, the same materials, but used for music, which is a literal, but also it's a literal, like all the strings are harmonized in a certain harmonic pattern. So this says a lot in like a little bit of space to compare the bow and the harp. I think it's really interesting. There's a lot to think about there. Like, it's curious that, and paradoxical, that tension can create a weapon of war, but also a beautiful instrument. So somehow in our lives and in the world, tension and conflict can yield different results depending on where and how the things occur and in what actors are involved. Like the same is true for philosophy, as I've been discussing. Like the study in philosophy, study and lifestyle philosophy are intense and conflicting, but at the same time, like there's this tension, like how am I going to figure this out? What does this mean for me, for my life? But depending on like where philosophy happens and how it happens, it can yield beneficial or dangerous results. Like I was saying, I mean, philosophy can send you into a tailspin of like questioning your whole life and your culture, your behavior, your identity. And then at the same time, at some point, that tension is good for you. And like the pain of it is, I'm not going to say that I like the pain or something stupid like that for somebody to like make fun of me or something. But the pain of and conflict of philosophy, the internal turmoil, is eventually at some point beneficial. So it's really interesting to think about tension and where pressure is applied in certain places, like acupuncture. If it's in certain needles, like nobody wants a needle in their body, but at the same time, I mean, maybe some people are into that, but at the same time, if you put the pressure in the right places, it can yield different results, like things that are good for your health or your mental health or stress relief. So I think it's fascinating to think about this paradox and how Heraclitus uses this imagery. And lastly, he uses the imagery of the bow as a metaphor for life and death in this fragment 48. So like without the tensions of life, without the tensions of death and strife, life would like not move forward or even be possible, literally, because without death and strife, there is no time. Like time would not pass. But at the same time that we know we're going to die, we live our lives and terrible things happen, but also we experience like the beautiful melody and harmony of life. As like the music from a harp. So it's deep. It's like profound and fascinating. Heraclitus just has the most going on out of all the Presocratics. And these kind of sitting with these paradoxes and these dualities is just all what philosophy is about. And that is why Heraclitus gives so much, and he's so important to study, I think, as like beginning in philosophy. And yeah, I don't think anybody should skip the Pre-Socratics. I don't know. I found it interesting that I know. Let me back up. I find it interesting that my education is different. Like, I know I'm a major in stuff of philosophy and a graduate. Like Paul, for example, is only a minor, but like they didn't cover the Pre-Socratics, and he seems to have covered Aristotle, but they didn't teach Aristotle in my school. So I don't know. I find it interesting the differences in education that crop up in experiences, because we both like went to private institutions, but depending on the professor and the pedagogical goals of the school, you could come out with different attitudes towards different things, which I think was playing out earlier and was interesting. I'm glad it wasn't too tense. If it was somebody I didn't know, it might have got tense, but Paul and I know each other well, and he's good. He's a good person to discuss things with sometimes. Yeah. Let me look at my comments here. Andre, I like the play between tension in philosophy and tension in physics. Yeah, that's interesting too. Yeah, because it is literal and figurative. I think I tried to mention that, but you did a good job of bringing up the physical part more. Tension can grow things forward. Tension can hold things back until they snap. Gravity can be tied to tension. Good, very good. Yeah, I like that. Did you see the link, by the way? Yeah, sorry about that. I got so into reading. I do see the link. I will look into that after the stream. Gravity, yeah. I didn't know about gravity back then, but yeah, interesting as like a sort of universal idea of pressure. Yeah, I like that. Gravity. Not the Sandra Bullock movie. Yeah, I'm gonna keep that in mind for the imagery of tension. Let me move on. Heraclitus has the most fucking quotes too. I think this is his last. Yeah, this is his last page. Okay. Last 3 Heraclitus quotes. Sad. I don't want him to go away. Fragment 62. This is the most cryptic of all the quotes maybe I've ever read ever, besides the Tao Te Ching. Fragment 62. Mortals are immortals, and immortals are mortals. The one living the other's death, and dying the other's life. Try and wrap your fucking noodle around that one for a second. I'm going to read the other ones. Fragment 93. The Lord who is the oracle at Delphi neither utters nor hides his meaning, but shows it by a sign. Fragment 101a. The eyes are more exact witness than ears. So we talked about this in my Turkey group, and this first cryptic quote, mortals are immortals. I just want to read it again because it's hard. Mortals are immortals, and immortals are mortals. The one living the other's death, and dying the other's life. Mortals are immortals, and immortals are mortals. Yeah. So my interpretation of this is shaky, but here goes. Mortals, here's what I have to say. I don't know how comfortable I feel with it, but mortals live the death of immortals. Immortals die the life of mortals. maybe mortals live to see the gods they know fall out of worship and new gods rise up. And also, mortals die for the gods. So it's a criticism of dying for the gods for no good reason. I'm not sure. Possibly mortals living the death of immortals. This is my rendition of it, trying to make sense of it. Because mortals are immortals, and then it says the one living the other's death. So this is referring to the first part. Mortals live the death of immortals. Immortals are mortals. Immortals dying the life of mortals. So I think, yeah, it's just seems like a critique that like the immortals are not really mortals, and when people die, like soldiers die, we venerate them as if they were gods. They died an honorable death. They will like live forever in our memories. Like we cannot forget those who died to protect our lives, our society, our way of life. So yeah, and something I'm not sure. And some other fragments, Heraclitus seems to believe in the gods, but here I read it as a critique of gods not actually being immortal like we think they are. Does anyone have any thoughts on this? Because I find this to be very cryptic and strange. Let me see what people said. Herschel, immortals are only immortal as long as we remember them, acknowledge them. Man can outlast immortals simply because worship of that immortal is forgotten, but man can live on. Yeah, I think there's something to that. I was saying a similar thing, I think, because like even in ancient Greece doesn't have like a national identity. Like the cities fought with each other, like Sparta, Thebes, and Athens, and the other ones fought with each other, and they worship different gods. Like the god of Athens, they worship there as Apollo, and it's different depending where you go. And different people have different names for the gods, and the myths always change all the time. There are many different variations and versions. So maybe it's possible that Heraclitus is commenting on this, like, because when Athens dies, and if it's totally wiped out, who's going to worship Apollo, like if the Persians come and kill them all, Apollo's just gone. He might be renamed and appear in another form, but yeah, maybe fighting for the gods is fruitless. He seems more interested in fighting for our laws and our society. But yeah, I think there might be something there. Okay, let me mention these last two quotes. The Oracle at Delphi quote, I'll read it again. The Lord who is the Oracle at Delphi neither utters nor hides his meaning, but shows it by a sign. So I put this because it's really important for Plato. The Oracle at Delphi is the temple to the god Apollo in Athens, as I was just talking about. As I have talked about already, my notes can be repetitive sometimes. I was talking about it last stream. I skipped over it some this time. The way things appear and the way things actually are is like a huge discussion and debate for Plato's philosophy. So this quote here that Heraclitus says is a testament to Plato's Socrates' belief that there is something more real than the physical world, that the world is filled with signs of a hidden reality, things that are stable, things that are being and not a part of time, that are not caught up in becoming. It's complicated. We're going to get to that in a few weeks and we're gonna start it, this being becoming opposition in with the next and last pre-Socratic. I'm gonna do Parmenides. So let me show you some more pictures. Heraclitus lived in Ephesus, which was also in Greece, and here I am taking a picture at Ephesus. This is like the main walkway where there would have been all these, you could see still, all these columns, these fancy columns with like arches on them. People would have walked by to go down to, this is the library, and there's a bigger amphitheater down here if you go around the bend, and like the main square and stuff. So there's a lot of tourists here, a lot of cats and wild dogs living here as well. They were like fighting while we were walking around. This is one of the biggest ancient Greek ruins left, as far as city-wise. There's a lot of it remaining. It was really fascinating to take a tour of it and hear everything that they had to say. It was, and honestly, what I was talking about earlier with visiting the ruins of Miletus, I was trying to explain the experience. It was different because Miletus is like almost entirely abandoned. Like you don't have to pay to get in there. It's just there. Like I don't even think people know about it or give tours really, or respect it even. I mean, there wasn't graffiti on it or anything, but this was a different experience because you have to pay. It's tourism. There are some signs up, I think, explaining some stuff. We had a tour guide, but yeah, this is like, Miletus was much more somber experience, like reflecting on death and the fall of nations in time. And this was a lot more touristy with like a lot of people, and this was a lot more like amazement, because they still had like toilets that were there that people used to use, and they told us like how the servants, gotta go for now, later. Okay, bye Herschel. Good to have you here, thanks for stopping by. They told us how the servants would like warm the cold toilet seats for the rich people and stuff, and there were like statues left of Hercules, and there's other stuff, all these statues, and like the front of the library is still up. The amphitheater is really well preserved, and yeah, it was interesting. It was different from Miletus. This is the library that was left. I have some closer pictures I didn't put in because there are like too many people in them. But I mean, it's not swarmed with people, but it was, at Miletus, it was just my group of people. Like it was just our philosophy group. Here there were like Asian tourists with like bags of cat food feeding stray cats and stuff. So it was funny and interesting to see that kind of stuff. There are statues left here of some of the gods, and this was like a giant library where the philosophers would go and people would go to study knowledge that they would bring from Egypt and other nations. Underneath it, though, is a secret tunnel, and like across the street there's like this ruined building, and it was a brothel. And for like study breaks or like to cheat on their wives, they'd be like, I'm going to the library, and then they'd take the secret tunnel to the brothel. I mean, you needed a secret tunnel because it's like a small town, you know, everybody knows everybody, so you can't just be walking into the brothel if you're like married. So they would sneak into the brothel and, I don't know, go get some action, I guess. I always thought that was interesting and funny, and sort of demystified like scholarship a little bit, because like there's always all this like worship and like we love the ancient Greeks, but you know, some of them were just sneaking into the library, cheating on their wives and stuff and partners. I just think that that's funny. Okay, so I'm just going to keep going. It's just Brady and Sunset. Not a lot of questions. So I'm going to finish up. This is the last guy, last page of notes. And then I have a little treat at the end that I put just for fun. Okay. That's hilarious. Yeah, it's really funny, I think. So Parmenides. Let me just read through his whole thing. He's got 2 slides here. And this translation is like it's an Englishy, old Englishy one, which is kind of gross and hard to follow, but just try. Just bear with me here. Just like any other civilization. Yeah. Okay, Parmenides. Come now, I will tell thee, and do thou hearken to my saying, and carry it away. The only 2 ways of search that can be thought of. The first, namely, that it is impossible for it not to be, is the way of belief, for truth is its companion. The other, namely, that it is not, and that it must needs not be. That, I tell thee, is a path that none can learn of at all. For thou canst not know what is not. That is impossible, nor utter it, for it is the same thing that can be thought that can be. So essentially, I don't know if I should keep reading. I might explain this a little bit. He wants to talk about things that are, like Heraclitus and like Anaximander talking about these things we can't know about, like infinity, or things that are not there but also there. Like we can't talk about those things. We can never make a belief or truth about those things. I'm gonna keep going though. It needs must be that what can be spoken and thought is, for it is possible for it to be, and it is not possible for what is nothing to be. This is what I bid thee ponder. I hold thee back from this first way of inquiry, and from this other also, upon which mortals, knowing not, wander two-faced, for helplessness guides the wandering thought in their breasts, so that they are borne along stupefied, like men deaf and blind, undiscerning crowds who hold that it is and is not the same, and not the same, and all things travel in opposite directions. So he's saying like Heraclitus and other philosophers who are doing all this like speculation about non-being and absence are just confusing people. They're confusing the audience. They're saying things to make themselves sound smart, but really we can't even talk about those things. So we need another method. Okay, this is the last part, I promise. One path only is left for us to speak of, namely that it is. In this path are very many tokens that what is uncreated and indestructible, for it is complete, immovable, and without end. Nor was it ever, nor will it be, for now it is, all at once, a continuous one. For what kind of origin for it wilt thou look for? In what way and from what source could it have drawn its increase? I shall not let thee say nor think that it came from what is not, for it can neither be thought nor uttered that anything is not. And if it came from nothing, what need could have made it arise later rather than sooner? Therefore must it be either altogether or not at all. Neither will the force of truth suffer aught to arise beside itself from that which is not. Wherefore justice does not loose her fetters and let nothing come into being or pass away, but it holds fast. Our judgment thereon depends on this. Is it or is it not? Surely it is adjudged, as it needs must be, that we are to set aside the one way as unthinkable and nameless, for it is no true way, and that the other path is real and true. How then can what is be going to be in the future, or how could it come into being? If it came into being, it is not, nor is it if it is going to be in the future. Thus is becoming extinguished and passing away not to be heard of. Nor is it divisible, since it is all alike, and there is no more.
of it in one place than in any other, to hinder it from holding together, nor less of it, but everything is full of what it is. Wherefore it is wholly continuous, for what it is in contact with what it is. Moreover, it is immovable in the bonds of mighty chains, without beginning and without end, since coming into being and passing away have been driven afar, and true belief has cast them away. It is the same, and it rests in the self-same place, abiding in itself, and thus it remaineth constant in its place, for hard necessity keeps it in the bonds of the limit that holds it fast on every side. Wherefore it is not permitted to what is to be infinite, for it is in need of nothing, while if it were infinite, it would stand in need of everything. Okay, so, what a guy. Fucking Parmenides. He hates all this coming into being and passing away talk when you're talking about the basis of the universe. He thinks it doesn't make logical sense that becoming or something as fickle as fire could be the basis of the universe, because then the universe itself would cease to be. Or as he puts it, if it were infinite, then it would need everything. And that's not possible to him. And so he is this sort of like guy who's like, look around you, everything is standing there all the time, and these are the things we could talk about, like trees or rocks, and we can only talk about things that are in our experience, that are like right there. So things that do not exist or might not exist in the future are impossible to make a certain statement about, not like a specific statement, but a statement with certainty. So that means we could never arrive at like a communal belief about these things or truth. So we are here, the universe is here, and that's it. That's the end of it, according to Parmenides. So I don't like Parmenides. I disagree with portions of his critique that he has against Heraclitus and Anaximander. But I think he makes some interesting points, like these. How does becoming work with the universe, you know? How could we simply blink out of existence at any moment? Like, what is the universe's relationship to time? Does it stand within it, like outside of it, or are they one and the same? I think Parmenides comes off as arrogant and kind of a jerk, but he makes a lot of interesting questions come up. His interesting point, which is also his best known point, if you ever hear anything about Parmenides, which I'm sure you just walk down the street and you hear people talking about Parmenides, right? If you do, you'll hear it like this, and this translation does not show it. It doesn't do it justice. Even the author seems against the common translation. I don't know if he was trying to make waves in academia by translating it differently, but he says in most translations that thinking and being are the same. So if what he was saying with like this sort of logical method, if one thinks about things that are, then one will arrive at a belief based on truth, because those things are actual. They're there in reality. They be there, you know? They are right there. They're being, you like can't deny them. So if one thinks about things that are not, well, that's just not even possible, according to him. According to him, it's not thinking. It's just a useless, pointless activity that will lead to nothing. Like maybe you're imagining stuff, maybe you're just making it up, that kind of thing. So that's pretty much his critique of Heraclitus. Essentially, Heraclitus and Anaximander are talking nonsense. They're pulling shit out of their ass and calling it gold. On many points, I really disagree with Parmenides. I think that to deny the ideas of absence and non-being is foolish. I think his connection of thinking to being as a ground for being itself excludes animals, excludes plants, and the earth as beings. So his definitions of being is extremely human centric and based on individuality. So our existence is like taken out of this web of complicated relationships, and we're just beings, you know. We're just by ourselves. We are there, and I don't know, it's very exclusionary and like lonely, short-sighted, and incomplete, I think. On the other hand, the way in which we grasp existence is like often through human thought patterns. So to us, thinking like is being in a literal sense from our perspective, because human consciousness is so deeply connected to human thought that to us we can't really like contemplate or get to like the reality of a plant. Like, how does it exist, or how does a bat exist with its sonar, or how does a fucking starfish exist, you know? So to us, existence is defined by our perspective of how we see reality, you know, which is thinking and colors, certain color patterns, certain tastes and smells, certain senses that we have. And so he's right about it in some ways, but I think that it's revolutionary for him to say that, like, no doubt. But it's also extremely dangerous because he leads Western thought down this path to modern individualism. So eventually, in human thought, in Western thought, being becomes associated with the single, essential, non-changing self, and not this Heraclitean becoming self that you always have to meditate on, like your environment, your relationships to anything, people around you, the weather, the room that you're in, the lighting that you're in, like what memories you're feeling or thinking about lately. And like, I don't know, it's just, you have to keep track of your self-development because it's always under pressure and tension, gravity of changing. And I think Parmenides pushes all that aside. It's like, no, we're just being here, and thinking is only being. Like, so it just is so exclusionary, limiting, and it doesn't do much, you know? I mean, it does like a reflection on consciousness and how we do being as humans, as thinking beings. But other than that, it's really dangerous. The other critique I have, well, this plane of Stoicism, sorry, pause here. We didn't do the Stoics. The Stoics, I don't know why we didn't do the Stoics. They have a very different lifestyle, a lot like the Pythagoreans, in which their philosophy is deeply tied to their way of life. So it's very specific and not as like widespread influence on the history of philosophy. So they're kind of easy to skip over, it seemed like, was my impression for my education. But I would do the Stoics at some point. I'd have to like read up on them because I know something about their lifestyle, but not really about their philosophy. I don't think they had a lot of original ideas. I think they took a lot from Plato and the Greeks and stuff, but probably why they were skipped in my education. But could be interesting. Anyways, last thing I gotta say here, Parmenides is so focused on being, and that allows you to reach unadulterated truth with a capital T, and that like changes the goal of philosophy, which is more about discussion and process, instead of like, and like, you know, maybe it'll lead somewhere, maybe it won't. We're just doing it because we love it, and it's necessary for our lives and our relationships to do deliberation and share as a community. But with just focusing on being, trying to get to truth, that can only lead to dogma, oppositions, and like violence. So I don't really like the way that he sets up the world. I think it's dangerous. I think that he kind of, in some ways, it's revolutionary, but in some ways, he bastardizes philosophy by cutting out becoming. It's unclear how time would work in his idea of being, because some things are just there and they don't change, you know? So, yeah, I think he lays the conditions for dangerous worlds where tradition rules, where the new is shunned, and those types of things, where people are in opposing cultures, and it's difficult for them to change, which in some ways is really realistic, because the world is like that sometimes. But I don't know, maybe Heraclitus is more fantastical. In some ways he's more honest, but in some ways he too does not acknowledge the trenched in positions our cultures find themselves in. Although he does, I don't know. Fuck it, I'm just gonna say Heraclitus is better than Parmenides. I don't care. He's got this like interesting, beautifully perplexing, bittersweet, flowing idea of the world. And Parmenides is just like, no, we can't talk about things that aren't there. That's fucking impossible. You guys are dumb. Everything is already like done for us, and we're just stuck in these hopeless, unchangeable states. I just find Parmenides to be, at the same time, he's revolutionary. He's not very imaginative. He's not very creative. He doesn't have any cool, like, cryptic sayings. So logical. You could start to feel the logical coldness that will become philosophy in the future in Parmenides. And that's pretty gross. Yeah, I'm done. I have some pictures to show you just for fun. I was mentioning the stray cats and animals that were all over Turkey. I did a little slideshow of all the cats that I met in Turkey. So you could just enjoy that. Just as like a wind down. Here are my citations. This is the book I used in Wikisource, Creative Commons license, for those copyright lawyers coming after me. Here's a cat that I met outside of Hagia Sophia. It wasn't very nice, but it was cute. And I got a good picture of it. It liked getting its picture taken, but not being pet. This is a cat. I can't remember his name. It's like something like Gimli, like Glimly or something. Glim Lie? I don't know. He's a famous cat on Instagram that lives in Hagia Sophia. He also has a friend too, but I didn't get a good picture of him. And this cat just chills in the super old church, and people take pictures with him and they post on Instagram and use him to get people to come. This was a kitten playing with a feather while I was eating the super delicious Turkish sub. Glimmershy? Yeah, I'll take that. This kitten was really cute. There's a whole group of cats next to our lunch. This one is the edgiest cat I've ever seen. He was like licking his belly or his leg or something. So he's like sitting up, doing a crunch and staring at me evilly. I got some really good pictures of cats when I was there. So many stray cats. This cat is really beautiful. He looks like some ancient Egyptian cat or something like that. that they would worship. This is another one. Really nice stripes on this one, It's giving you like a kind of flirtatious look, maybe. I'm not sure. This dude was stretching. I think this one was really nice. Little tabby. He's got one white arm, one tabby arm. That's nice. He's got like boots like SDJ does. This is an orange and white one. He was nice, I think. I don't really remember where he was at. But just from his face, I remember him being nice. This is a kitten. You can see the temple at Ephesus behind the kitten. These are like the cats the Asian lady tourists were feeding and stuff. I don't know where they got bags of cat food from. I like his sleeve. It is a nice sleeve. But I like that this cat looked as big as the library. Like maybe he destroyed it or something. And he looks kind of pissed off. This was just a cute little guy. I like his little V on his chest. Yeah, he's got nice colors. This guy could barely open one of his eyes. All these cats were at Ephesus. They were just piles of cats laying and sleeping on the ground. Sick tribal sleeve tat, yeah. This guy was nice. He gives you a nice little wink, squinty-eyed look. This cat was weird as fuck. It has a collar on. We were at a restaurant, and it's like the owner's cat, I guess. It has super weird, like, long hair coming out of its ears, and it was like had all this weird dirt on its back. And it just gave me this weird look a bunch. I got a good picture of it. I love this one. Seems to me the cats own the ruins and allow humans to explore in exchange for food. Yeah, I would definitely believe that. I think all of the money that I paid to go into Ephesus went to like Meow Mix or something, or cat toys. I love this cat though. I think this is the last one. This isn't a cat. It's for the dog lovers. I got a really good picture of this dog that we walked up this giant hill to get to the top of this ancient city Argos. And there's like, it was built on a hill because it's a fort, and Argos is like fort, I think. And there's like an ancient temple up there, and this dog followed us all the way up the hill from the town and into the ruins and walked around the ruins with us. He was so nice, and I think he looked so contemplative, like a philosopher dog or something. And I got a good picture of him looking out at the Aegean Sea. Nice dog. And yeah, that is it. Does anybody have burning? This went on for almost as long as the other one. A lot less viewers. Does anybody want to like say anything? Sunset has said nothing the whole time. Probably because she was partying all last night. I put some pictures in this time. People wanted pictures. I would have liked to get a picture of a bow and a lyre, and some pictures of like the philosophers. They always have like busts of them, like head sculptures of their head and stuff. Good boy, he was on a pilgrimage. Yeah, I got a lot of pictures from Turkey that are nice. It was great. Most beautiful place I've ever been. Such good food. I had goat head soup there. It's called Kali Pacha. People give you free shots and stuff and free drinks, and the terrain was like crazy mountainous, and also like these beautiful seas and on the coast, and it was nice. It was a really nice place. Delicious Turkish delight. The best wine I've ever had. everything was super cheap because of the conversion rate to the Turkish lira. Yeah. I'm sorry, I like the old guy grouch. Not a ton of questions, just to think about. Just cool to think about. Okay, I'll take that. You just had a lot of questions last time, so I was wondering. Yeah. What do Turkish people put on a sub? They love to use lamb, like Euro meat. I think that must have been on there. Vegetables. There were like spicy peppers on it. Feta cheese, probably. I'm trying to taste it. Spinach, some kind of sauce that I'm maybe not familiar with what it was. They're like these hot pepper kind of subs. And I ate this dried hot pepper before I had it. And it was the hottest pepper I've ever had in my whole life. Like, just like the skin in my mouth on my cheek. One side of my cheek was just burning for like hours. Just nonstop burning. Like one of the seeds like touched it. The cheek skin on the inside, and it was like, holy shit. I never had such hot food ever. Although they're not really known to have really spicy food, just that sub was super spicy. It was great though. I miss it. Yeah. It was good. I think that's all. I'm not really sure. My momentum on my stream has been lost some this week. Hoping to gain it back next week. Yeah, I would have liked more discussion for this stream, but it's kind of interesting. People seemed... I know philosophy is more boring than like intense. Mediterranean food is the bee's knees. That's right. You're right, dude. That's interesting. Philosophy can be boring, but and people respond more to if you're reading something. Like I read like a lot of the Theogony last time, and even though parts of that can be dull, you guys seem to like enjoy that, and people in general respond to something more creative, you know? And that will happen. Like Plato is a lot more creative in many ways than many other philosophers. And yeah, so maybe it'll pick up if I do Plato. Plato's more well known, although I don't think people on Twitch give a fuck about Plato. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm surprised I stretched this out to 3 hours. I did have a lot of notes. I did cover like every single topic for the Presocratics pretty much. So that is a lot to do all at once. Yeah, I hope you guys got something out of it. I enjoyed doing this. It could be a lot of work for me, but it's good for me. I don't know if I'm going to stream more today. My throat feels better than it did last time, but I don't know. I just worked so much yesterday that really my day off is the Sunday afternoon after the stream. So maybe I'll come back with a little stream, maybe try out a new game. Could be interesting, could be fun. So I don't know. I got other games to play, you know. I'd like to get a monitor today, but I don't know if it's going to happen. Okay. Thanks, guys. I'm going to end it. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for sticking around and listening to my sometimes boring going-ons about the intricacies of philosophical history and all that jazz. Next Sunday, I should be back as long as I don't procrastinate a lot. with the Pythagoreans and the Sophists. Andre the Giant fan said, "Thanks for sharing and talking. Have a good day, man. I'll be on time for the next one. Popcorn." Yeah, sure. I don't mind waiting that much, because anyone else could show up too, just random people. So, and it helps me get in the right headspace to do like a little waiting period, I think. But I know it's kind of early at a weird time, possibly for you, but yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about being a little bit late. If you're super late, you're gonna miss some stuff. So, but that's your problem. um, yeah, you have a good day too. Thanks for coming in. I think Eric was too busy this time, but that's fine. I'll get him in here one day. Bye, guys.